Tamil Nadu, even as DMK MLA and former Fisheries Minister Anita Radhakrishnan has been arrested after the Madras High Court rejected his anticipatory bail plea. Now, the case stems from alleged defamatory remarks made against Chief Minister Joseph Vijay during a public meeting in Thoothukudi on the 20th of June. Now, we're told that police moved in soon after the court's order and took the Tiruchendur MLA into custody. Now, while Anita Radhakrishnan himself has actually gone about being detained and arrested by the police, the fact is that the DMK has also condemned the arrest, accusing the Vijay government of targeting the opposition, while the ruling side maintains that the action actually follows due legal process. So the DMK MLA and former minister there in a bit of a jam after making those comments against the chief minister at a public meeting in Thoothukudi. Moving on, India's pharmaceutical industry has traditionally been built on manufacturing muscle, big plants, even larger capacities, and billions of dollars invested in production. But one Hyderabad-based company is challenging that playbook, claiming it has built a 400 crore rupee API business without owning a single factory. Instead, it says its competitive edge lies in something less visible, and that's regulatory approvals, intellectual property, and customer relationships. Now, the model comes at a time when India's API sector is grappling with excess manufacturing capacity, even as companies continue to invest under the China Plus One opportunity. So can an asset-light platform become the next evolution of pharma manufacturing, or are there risks to scaling a business that depends entirely on third-party production? Joining us now is HRV Pharma's Managing Director and CEO, Hari Kiran Cheredi, to explain how this model works and whether it can reshape in the industry's economics when it comes to pharma manufacturing itself. Mr. Hari, thank you so much for joining us on South Central. Now, the fact remains, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that most people associate pharma with massive factories. But here you are, 400 crore rupee business without owning a single plant. How exactly does that work, and why did you choose this model in the first place?
Sure. Thank you, for having me today. When we started, this company in 2016 with active operations beginning from 2018, I want to be very honest about what actually drove this decision, because it wasn't that we could not simply just start a plant, back then. It was that I looked at the industry and saw existing plants not running at peak capacity. Building one more factory into a system that already had spare capacity sitting idle would have meant just adding inefficiency, not solving anything at all. So the real insight was never, would I build another factory? It was just about, why would I fight the industry's inefficiency by adding to it? That's where this started. I had spent time earlier in my career around traditional pharmaceutical companies, and I had seen up close what owning physical assets does to the balance sheet and to a founder's ability, especially to move fast. Every rupee tied up in steel and concrete is a rupee not going into the next regulatory filing or the next market or the next molecule. So when I say we're asset light, I didn't mean it just as a buzzword, or we don't just use it just like that. We've made a very, very clear and deliberate choice to own that thing which actually determines whether you can enter a market, which is the regulatory filings, the drug master files, the formulation dossiers. And then we said manufacturing is something that we would let the people who are already brilliant at it continue to do it. And that's where we become a very complementing, business to the existing capacities. So we bring the filings, we bring the market access, and we bring the discipline of quality oversight, and the division of labor is very, very clear. And that's the whole business. So very, very simply put, I would say we design and certify the product. We don't pour more concrete or prove that we own, to prove that we own the outcome. So we've actually, kept it very, very simple, in that, way.
Right. So let's take a look at some of the numbers we're dealing with here, even as, you've just said that you let the folks who are good at manufacturing to keep at it. So let's take a look at the numbers here. 53 manufacturing partners is what you have, and you serve customers across 55 countries. So if someone else is making the APIs, how do you ensure that quality is consistent every single time and then solve for consistency problems that could perhaps emerge? What's the playbook here?
So honestly, this was the question that I used to keep me up at night early in the years of our business, and it would always say, if you don't own the plant, how do you sleep well, knowing what's happening on a shop floor some thousands of kilometers away? And the answer for us was that trust cannot be a feeling; it has to be a system. And then we said, before any partner enters our network, they go through a very, very stringent qualification process, which is around the US FDA, the EU GMP certifications, which often happen to be only the entry ticket into this one and not the finish line. So after that, it's a continuous standardized set of audits, a real-time set of tracking of performance, a structured way of catching and closing issues before they even become a shipment or a regulatory issue is what we have consistently done. We built our very own strong framework. We rely heavily on technology. We have strong visibility live across 53 partners so that I never have to be thinking of someone telling me a plant is fine. I can see it, right now it's okay. But with that said, on one side, I travel more than half the year. And because I still believe, in being in front of the customer and making sure the system is what it scales and not just my calendar. So for me, the honest version is that we don't inherit quality from our partners. We engineer it into the relationship from the first conversation. So, and in fact, I can proudly say that we probably are less than, maybe 0.5% or 1%, in terms of any quality recalls till date in the last so many years. And, touch wood, I don't want to jinx it by, giving a percentage to it. But we've been very, very successful with making this happen.
We won't jinx it, at least, not for the moment, but the fact is, and you've spoken about this as well, about India's API plants operating at just 50 to 55% capacity. And it was that gap essentially that led to the emergence of this model. So was that inefficiency per se the business opportunity that you perhaps spotted before everyone else, which gave you folks a bit of a first mover advantage?
So for me, I remember exactly when it clicked for me. I was visiting plants early on and I kept seeing the same thing. World-class FDA certified capabilities and capacities sitting not used to their full extent. And that's when, I said, India does not have a capacity problem. It has a capability. It is a utilization problem. And the utilization problems are solvable without building, a single new brick. So instead of adding one more factory to an industry that already had, additional capacity, we asked a very different question. We said, how do we bring demand and regulatory access to the capacity that already exists? And we said, how can we bring the filings? How can we bring market aggregation? How can we make sure that our partners run fuller capacities and earn more from the assets they've already built? So immediately it started being a very, very complementing business to the existing capacity. So it's not just about disruption. A lot of people, talk about disruption these days and they say, they throw the word around. It sounds more like, densification. Everyone in the chain gets more efficient in our system. And today the opportunity was never the gap in capability. It was the gap in utilization. So we closed that gap. And today I proudly tell people saying we closed that gap without actually adding a single additional brick to the, capacity cycle.
Right. So let's take a look at the growth then of HRV Pharma, Hari. You've grown at around 60 to 65% annually over the last 5 years. What's been the biggest driver of that growth? And can you essentially maintain that pace even as you scale further?
Sure. So what's driving our growth, is not just what we typically look at and what our competitor growth asks for. When a plant owning competitor wants to grow, they need capital, they need years of lead time to build capacity. When we want to grow, we really need to identify the next molecule, the next market, or the next regulatory asset, and the next partner in the relationship. So the runway is much shorter for us. Now, can we keep it up? I think the honest answer is the constraint for us was never capital or capacity. It's just discipline, choosing the right molecules, choosing the right partners to take these products to market, not growing for the sake of a headline number. As long as we hold that discipline, the model itself will not run out of road. the way a capital-heavy model, eventually will do. So our growth doesn't need new steel and concrete; it just needs the new, frontier or molecule for us to grow. So I'm very confident, that we can actually not only meet but probably beat some of our expectations here.
Right, and I'm really glad you bring about, capital and funding, Hari, because I don't know if most of our viewers are aware about this, but when you started HRV Pharma, you did that with just 1 lakh rupees in terms of, funds that you brought to the table. Ever since, you haven't raised outside capital and continue to remain debt-free. Was staying bootstrapped always part of this vision that you had, or have you simply never found the right investor? Or are perhaps more investors knocking at the door as we speak?
So it was both. If I am very honest, it started as a very simple necessity. I simply didn't need much capital back then. But somewhere along the way, it actually became a conviction. I watched what happens to founders who raise a large round early on. Very often, the easiest thing to do with that money is default to the conventional playbook. You would build a plant because that's what pharma companies are supposed to do. I never had that option. And then looking back, I'm grateful, it did not, because it forced us to often find a better answer. I've competed at a very, very fairly high level in professional badminton personally. And one thing that sport has personally taught me is that it continues to sharpen you. They don't just, limit you. And staying bootstrapped did exactly the same thing for me at HRV. It keeps us fast, keeps us agile, keeps every decision in our own hands. And honestly, it's the reason why the model looks the way it is today. So we didn't stay bootstrapped because we couldn't raise capital. We stayed bootstrapped because the constraint, helped us build a better company. And to answer to the other part, there are people, wanting to invest capital in us, and we are not saying no to those conversations. But at the same time, it's a good place to be in, being zero debt, being cash rich, and also having a negative working capital. So this to me has been my biggest personal victory in the company's
recording
journey.
Stopped.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Hari, because if any investors are watching, it's important that they remember that you aren't exactly saying no to funding just yet. But, just moving on, you're targeting 1,000 crore rupees in revenue over the next couple of years. Does this asset-light model become even stronger as you grow, or do you eventually reach a point where owning manufacturing actually makes more sense given these targets that you have for yourself?
So I get asked this question a lot, and I answer why, and I understand why. Because people intuitively assume scale eventually forces you to go back towards owning your own things. So for us, it's actually the opposite. Every new filing sits on the same partner network or a new partner that's already brought into the network. The economics actually compound as we grow rather than reset. So that's why you see it shows up in the numbers, a negative working capital cycle, a high return on capital. Growth is amplifying our efficiency, not just diluting it. So let me be very, straight on about this, because I don't want any ambiguity here. Zero-owned manufacturing is not a phase we grow out of. It's the founding principle of this company, and it stays exactly as true at 1,000 crores or as it did when we started with 1 lakh. So the day we own a plant, we become exactly like what everyone else in the industry already is. And I don't see a case for that, at least not now and not anytime later. So as I said earlier, we complement the existing infrastructure. We will never compete with them. So all the existing manufacturing facilities and manufacturing companies are our friends, and we will continue to work with them to help us scale, not push towards just owning plants. It just keeps proving that we never needed to. So that's where I would leave it at.
Right. So one last question before we wrap up very quickly. What would you like HRV Pharma to be if we were to have this conversation in 5 years from now? 1,000 crore rupee company, or the company that changed the way India's API or pharma industry thinks about manufacturing?
So if you were to ask me this question when I started the company, I don't think I would have said a revenue milestone story ever since. I would have said I want to prove something is possible, and that has not changed. The 1,000 crore matters, definitely, because it gives us improved credibility. It gives our partners and customers more and more confidence in how the company is actually performing. What I actually want is for other founders in the industry and people who are looking at it, is to look at what we build and start questioning their own assumptions about, is it really possible? Is it really viable? Is it really scalable? And then, once they start questioning, I think that's when we a pharma company and what a pharma company has to own and what should it own to be taken very seriously. If in 5 years someone is rethinking their capital structure because HRV proved a regulatory first, IP first model can scale to global standards, from India without owning a single manufacturing site, that's the win I actually would care about. And the number is just the evidence and the model will be our legacy. So I would rather be known for changing the industry's assumptions than for a number on a slide. And I'm proud to say that we have indeed created a new category here. So that's how I would look at it.
Well, the fact is, Hari, a win is something that you've already begun owning, even for the moment, even as you notch up these numbers without owning that manufacturing asset. On that note, thank you so much for joining us in South Central and helping break down these insights. Great speaking to you, Hari.
Thank you. Pleasure.
But moving on and staying with more news from business, the Karnataka cabinet has formally opposed Tata Power's proposed entry into the state's electricity distribution business. The government has directed all state-run power distribution companies, or ESCOMs, to file objections before the Karnataka Electricity Regulatory Commission, which is hearing Tata Power's license application. Chief Minister DK Shivkumar says the government is against the privatization of power distribution, while Tata Power is seeking licenses to distribute electricity across multiple districts in the state of Karnataka. And amid the centre's scrutiny of WhatsApp's proposed username feature, Chennai-based Zoho has announced that its messaging platform Aratai will also disable username-based accounts. Founder Sridhar Vembu, who is also chief scientist at Zoho, said the move was being aimed at complying with the government's regulatory changes. The decision comes after the centre asked Meta to pause WhatsApp's username rollout over concerns that the feature could in fact enable impersonation, phishing and online fraud. Similar notices have also reportedly been sent to both Telegram and Signal. Meanwhile, global medical device maker Zimmer Biomet is ramping up its India presence, announcing plans to hire 500 employees over the next 3 years for its newly opened technology center in Bengaluru. Around two-thirds of these roles will be in software engineering, product design and R&D, with the rest across quality, regulatory and finance. The company says that the Bengaluru hub will focus heavily on artificial intelligence, supporting innovations in robotics and surgical planning as India continues to strengthen its position as a global capability center hub. On to Telangana next. A worrying groundwater trend has emerged in the state, with 17 districts reporting a decline in groundwater levels following 12% below normal rainfall for the month of June. According to the latest groundwater level scenario report, Hyderabad recorded the sharpest fall, with groundwater levels dropping by 2.47 meters compared to the same period last year. Now, while 16 districts have registered an improvement, officials say that deficient rainfall and continued groundwater extraction remain key reasons behind the depletion. Meanwhile, Malayalam actor Dulquer Salman is set to be questioned again by the Customs Department in the alleged luxury vehicle smuggling case linked to vehicles that Dulquer is said to have allegedly imported from Bhutan. Officials are seeking additional documents after grilling the actor for nearly 7 hours earlier this week as part of an ongoing probe. Now, Customs has clarified that no charges have been filed against Dulquer, at least just as yet, with the investigation more focused on verifying the ownership and import trail of several luxury SUVs that have allegedly been linked to the actor. Switching back to politics next, Tamil Nadu's ruling TVK government is facing its first major political test after allegations of a cash for votes attempt triggered a full-blown war of words with the opposition DMK. Now, the controversy began when TVK MLA and L.I. Raja alleged that he was offered 35 crore rupees to vote in a particular manner during a proposed assembly resolution against the speaker. Now, the police have since arrested 3 people, with investigators probing alleged links to former DMK Minister V. Sendil Balaji and his brother. The DMK has dismissed these allegations made by the TVK. They're calling it baseless and even questioning as to why the DMK would need to poach TVK legislators, and has instead accused the ruling TVK of trying to lure opposition MLAs. The row has further intensified after 3 former AIADMK ministers joined the ruling TVK, with both sides denying any horse trading and accusing the other of attempting to destabilize the political landscape in Tamil Nadu. And speaking of ministers joining opposition parties and vice versa, Tamil Nadu's ruling TVK has received another major political boost, with former AIADMK ministers C. Vijay Bhaskar, MR Vijay Bhaskar and MSM Anandan formally joining Chief Minister Vijay's party, along with several senior leaders and thousands of supporters. Now, the defections deal a fresh blow to the AIADMK, which has been witnessing a steady exodus of leaders in the party, leaving them and joining the TVK that is, remember, in power in Tamil Nadu since assembly election results in May. The former ministers say they left the AIADMK over differences with the party leadership, and this even as the AIADMK itself has accused the ruling TVK of engineering defections to weaken Tamil Nadu's opposition parties. More news from Tamil Nadu. A legal battle over cow slaughter in the state has now reached the doors of the Supreme Court. The Vijay government here has challenged a Madras High Court order that directed authorities to ensure that no cow or calf is slaughtered in the state, not just during Bakrid, but on any day. The state argues that the High Court effectively imposed a blanket ban that goes beyond what was sought in the original petition and is inconsistent with existing law, especially under the Tamil Nadu Animal Preservation Act of 1958. Now, according to the Act, cow slaughter is regulated, not completely prohibited in Tamil Nadu. In fact, the law allows the slaughter of certain cattle, such as those over 10 years of age and unfit for breeding or agricultural work, this of course being subject to certification by a competent authority. The state has now argued that the High Court's order effectively rewrites the law and could create administrative confusion if allowed to stand. The Supreme Court is now expected to decide as to whether the blanket ban should remain in force or be lifted altogether. And with that, it's a wrap on the bulletin today. Thanks so much for watching South Central. We'll be back soon with more news and updates from South India. But for the moment, it's goodbye from us.
In volatile times when uncertainty speaks louder than facts, India's top regulators didn't choose noise. They chose credibility. SEBI Chairman Tuhin Kanta Pandey, RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra, IRDAI Chairman Ajay Seth.
Derivative markets also requires more development. Development of longer-term futures and options contracts in equity derivatives market will be an important part of deepening the capital markets. We will also be looking to bring in, along with RBI, derivatives on bond indices.
If it was so certain that we are going to hike in the coming months, then we would have changed the stance from neutral to restrictive, right? We did not do that precisely because there is elevated uncertainty.
Few channels which are on open architecture but competing on commission versus few channels which are by regulation not allowed to get into open architecture.
Yes, sir.
Both channels can't have the same level of commissions coming in. So this requires a careful calibration, if we were to say, and we will throw up those options in the consultation.
3 decisive voices, 2 weeks, 1 destination, ET Now. When India's regulators speak, they speak to the nation through us.
Every business is like a piece of land. From the outside, it looks ordinary. The real truth lies beneath. Dig once, you uncover losses. Dig again, unexpected profit shines back. Sometimes it's the heavy chains of debt. Other times, the break of fresh cash flow. But deep below, traps wait. And if you keep digging, you strike the jackpot. The real metrics, the real value. This is all about your company, where we dig deeper so you invest smarter.